Right, so there is a particular kind of confusion that happens in your late 30s, early 40s, where you step on the scales and genuinely cannot explain the number. You think back over the last 6 months and nothing dramatic comes to mind. You have not started eating entire cheesecakes in one sitting. You have not switched to a diet of exclusively takeaways and regret. You have, by any reasonable measure, been living more or less the same way you always have. And yet, the number is higher. The jeans are tighter. The shirts are doing something round the middle that they definitely were not doing 3 years ago. And the frustrating, quietly maddening part of it is that you cannot point to the decision. There was no decision. You did not choose this. You just arrived here. Nothing changed, except everything did. I want to talk about that. Not in a shame spiral, not in a, right lads, let us sort ourselves out motivational shout, but honestly, because I think most men who are quietly carrying a bit more weight than they want to are not lazy people who stopped caring. They are busy people whose life shifted underneath them and their habits never quite caught up. And I include myself entirely in this. I genuinely spent about 2 years convincing myself I was eating the same as I always had. And I was, roughly. The breakfasts were the same, lunch was more or less the same, dinner broadly. But what I was not counting, because you never count the things that do not feel like meals, was the biscuit with the afternoon tea, the second glass of wine on a Wednesday because work had been a bit of a disaster, the corner of whatever the boys had not finished on their plates because it seemed criminal to bin it, the crisps at 9:30 because, honestly, I was tired and the sofa was comfortable and they were right there on the shelf. None of those things feel like eating. But they are. And here is the part that gets me. At 25, my body burned through all of that without raising an eyebrow. I could eat like someone who had no plans beyond the next 10 minutes, sleep badly, barely move, and nothing much happened. The engine was running hot. It forgave everything. It does not do that anymore. It is not a moral failure. It is just biology. The metabolism slows. Muscle mass drops a little if you are not actively maintaining it. The hormones shift, recovery takes longer, and the same inputs that used to produce a perfectly reasonable output now produce a slightly different one. You have not changed. The equation has. Think about a man in his early 40s. Let us call him Dave, because there are enough Daves in any given British workplace to make this statistically likely. Dave has a decent job, a family, a mortgage with 14 years left on it, and a level of tiredness that he has quietly accepted as just how life is now. Dave plays five-a-side on a Thursday when work does not get in the way, which it increasingly does. Dave used to walk to the office. Now he drives because it is easier with the school run. Dave goes to bed meaning to get 7 hours and gets 6 because he stays up after the kids go down, partly because that is genuinely the only quiet hour in the day, and partly because he has earned it. Dave does not think he is doing anything particularly wrong. And he is not, really. But Dave is sitting down for 9 hours a day now instead of 5. Dave is stress snacking on things left on the kitchen counter because cortisol, which is the stress hormone, makes your brain treat biscuits as a reasonable response to a difficult email. Dave is sleeping worse, which means his hunger hormones are slightly out of order, which means he is more likely to reach for dense, easy food and less likely to feel full from it. And Dave is having a beer or two most weeknights, because again, he has earned it, which adds up across a week to a number of calories that would surprise him if he ever sat down and actually counted. Dave has not changed anything, but Dave's life has changed everything. The old system no longer fits the new life. The movement piece is the one that gets men most, I think, because it disappears so quietly you barely clock it. You do not decide to stop moving. Nobody sits down and thinks, right, I am going to dramatically reduce all incidental activity from my daily life. It just happens. The commute changes. The job gets more desk-based. The kids get old enough that you are no longer physically chasing them around parks. The five-a-side falls off because someone's knee goes, and then someone else is travelling for work, and suddenly the group chat is just memes, and nobody has played in 4 months. And you are still eating like a man who walks 6,000 steps before noon. There is a version of a man I used to be, in my late 20s, who walked to a train, walked from a station, walked between meetings, never really thought about it, and arrived home in the evening having covered 4 or 5 miles without it ever feeling like exercise. That man could eat a normal amount and it made sense. The man I became at 40 was doing about 1,100 steps on a slow Tuesday and still eating like the commuting version. The body, to its credit, was keeping very accurate records. And the alcohol. I want to be honest about the alcohol because I think men genuinely do not count it. A couple of beers on Friday, wine on Saturday, a beer watching the football on Sunday. Maybe something on a Wednesday because it is the middle of the week and that is apparently a thing now. That is somewhere between 6 and 10 units before you have really started. And the calories in all of that are substantial and come with almost no nutritional value and are more likely to be stored because of how the body processes alcohol compared to food. Again, I am not saying stop. I am saying count it. Because most of us are not counting it. The cost of all of this is not just the number on the scales. It is the slow, cumulative drain on energy. The confidence that quietly deflates when you avoid mirrors or take slightly longer to get dressed because nothing feels quite right. The way your back aches after something it would not have bothered you with 5 years ago. The low-level lethargy that you have attributed to work, to the kids, to just being tired, but which is also just, in part, the body running on worse fuel than it is used to. Not aesthetics. Just feeling like yourself again. Here is the compassionate bit, and I mean this because I think men can be brutal with themselves about this stuff when they eventually do pay attention. You did not fail, you just did not adjust. The habits that worked when you were 27, living differently, moving more, sleeping reasonably, working less, recovering faster, those habits were calibrated for a different life. The fact that they no longer work does not mean you are a different person. It means the conditions changed and the system needs a quiet update. That is all. Adjust the system, not the verdict on yourself. And the update does not have to be dramatic. Not a boot camp, not 6 weeks of misery and chicken breast. It is smaller than that. Walk more. Not a running program, not a half marathon, just more walking than you are currently doing. Reduce the obvious extras. The second biscuit, the third drink, the plate finishing out of habit rather than hunger. Protect the sleep a bit better. Because one of the best things you can do for your weight, your energy, and your decision-making is sleep a proper 7 hours. And be honest for a short time, a couple of weeks, about what is actually going in. Because most of us are genuinely surprised when we look closely. Not a diet, a recalibration. Closing the small leaks. The reason I want my boys to understand this is not so they spend their 30s anxious about their waistline. It is so they do not spend their 40s confused by it. Because the thing that trips most men up is not ignorance. It is the slow invisibility of it. The gain is gradual enough to explain away month after month. The jeans are just a bit stiff today. The scales are wrong. I have been a bit bloated. And then one morning you are looking at a photograph from a family birthday and you think, hold on, when did that happen? It happened in the ordinary Tuesdays. In the biscuits that did not feel like decisions, in the walks that never happened, in the evenings that were more wine than sleep, in the life that changed shape without asking. That is what I want them to know. Not that they should be afraid of getting older, or obsessed with staying thin, or haunted by every meal, just that the life changes around you, quietly and without announcement, and every now and then it is worth looking up and checking whether your habits still fit the life you are actually living. Because sometimes the problem is not that you changed. Sometimes the problem is that life changed and you just did not notice.